All right, Saagar, what are you looking at?
Well, if we're being honest, in many aspects of American lives, it really does not matter who the president is. The president rarely has much control, as we may think, over most of the things that we interact with on a daily basis. The only place that they really have total and complete control is foreign policy. That is why who we elect as president, their faculties, their judgment, their worldview is arguably the most important thing about them, even though consistently most Americans never really care that much about foreign policy and rank it as a top priority. It's especially important when you're dealing with nuclear powers and matters of war. A miscalculation, as we learned in the Cuban Missile Crisis, can literally be a matter of life or death for tens of millions of people. That is why I am getting increasingly dismayed by Joe Biden's cavalier, confused, and apparently contradictory statements on Taiwan. Now, Taiwan, as many of you know, is the island territory, or nation, depending on who you ask, off of the coast of China. Taiwan was originally the refuge of the nationalists who lost the Chinese Civil War in the 1940s. It has since developed into a thriving democracy and a technological powerhouse. By nearly all measures, it's a mostly separate ethnic group almost at this point from China, but that doesn't stop the Chinese Communist Party from claiming it as its own. The CCP views Taiwan's existence as an affront to its legitimacy of governance over all Chinese peoples. Now, rhetoric from the CCP in recent months has escalated significantly. Chinese President Xi Jinping vowing that what they call peaceful reunification with Taiwan, as we have seen multiple instances of Chinese military aircraft penetrating what's called the Taiwanese defense zone, in the aerial defense zone. It leaves everyone asking the question, so what's America gonna do if something happens out there? Now, the answer is pretty complicated because our relations with Taiwan are not entirely up to the president. The Taiwan Relations Act of 1979 establishes non-diplomatic relations with Taiwan, effectively not recognizing it as a country, but also kinda doing so. Militarily, it does not guarantee defense of Taiwan, only that the United States can provision Taiwan with the military capability to defend itself if needed. Now, on a broader, more conceptual level, this is known as strategic ambiguity. Now, it doesn't say that the US will defend Taiwan, and it also doesn't not say it. So that's the effective US policy towards Taiwan has been now for 4 decades. At least until Joe Biden spoke in his most recent town hall. Let's take a listen carefully to exactly what he says.
China just tested a hypersonic missile. What will you do to keep up with them militarily, and can you vow to protect Taiwan?
Yes and yes. We are militarily, China, Russia, and the rest of the world knows we have the most powerful military in the history of the world. Don't worry about whether they're going to be more powerful. What you do have to worry about is whether or not they're going to engage in activities that will put them in a position where they may make a serious mistake. And so I've spoken and spent more time with Xi Jinping than any other world leader has.
Now look, that is an extraordinary statement. Biden answered definitively that the US would defend Taiwan. That is a major change in American foreign policy, except that hours later, the White House put out a statement by Jen Psaki saying, quote, "The president was not announcing any change in our policy, nor has he made a decision to change our policy. There is no change in policy." In other words, what Biden just said is not the official position of the US government. Or is it? Now look, this is the worst of all worlds. If Joe Biden is saying we're going to defend Taiwan, then okay, that's policy. That would certainly change the calculus in Beijing as to whether they're going to make a go for that island or not. But instead, Biden is saying one thing definitively, and then the White House is effectively saying he misspoke. And actually, maybe we will still do something, maybe not. If anything, that level of drawing back commitment could actually signal to the Chinese, oh, if you do go for it, we won't do anything, which in turn could actually influence their calculus to make a go for the island. Now, as some of you know, I'm pretty obsessed with the First World War. One of the reasons that war broke out in 1914 was specifically because of lack of clear communication from world leaders as to what their real intentions were. The Kaiser would say one thing, and then the Foreign Office would say another, and then the ambassador would say something else. Now, the lack of clarity and communication left the interpretations up to a series of autocratic rulers. And at that point, when the decision is in the hands of a single man, it takes only one misreading of a situation for tens of millions of people to die. With nuclear weapons now, we're talking about hundreds of millions of people, lives at stake. and the same level of potential miscalculation by human beings. One reason I am highlighting this now is because I believe the potential for a major escalation in Asia is higher than it has ever been before. Not because China is rising, but conversely, because it may have peaked already. I've become obsessed recently with an argument advanced by Hal Brands that the Chinese economy, as we know, is basically completely fake. Evergrande was just the tip of the iceberg. Its tech companies, while good, are artificial state constructions. The foundation of its economy is graft and horse trading among senior Communist Party members. Such a system can only go on for so long. With COVID, with global economic disruptions, perhaps the music might stop domestically. And it's precisely at that moment, when a power believes that it may have peaked, when it has done all it can through domestic policy, that it may be at its economic peak, that war is actually most likely in history. It's the time rationally that would be the best to make a military move or to consolidate power and potentially attain or redirect more resources back to the declining state. Now, it's not without precedent. Look at how Russia has behaved under Putin, despite that it's an economic and demographic complete joke. It would also explain Germany's behavior in the First World War, Japan's in the Second World War. In all three cases, it entails a lashing out, an ignition of a major war. And in all three cases, clear communication from the United States or Great Britain could have prevented it. Now, it was precisely because of confusion that millions of people have died previously. Joe Biden is playing with fire. When he says one thing, the White House says another. People's lives are at stake, and we need a hell of a lot better right now. This is the thing, Crystal. I used to be very worried about this whenever it came to Trump and North Korea. Now, when they were
guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.